The heat was unbearable, the kind that pressed down like a heavy weight, turning the world into an oven. Officer Jason Miller was just finishing a routine patrol when a faint, desperate sound stopped him in his tracks, a whimper, soft and barely audible, coming from the far end of the supermarket parking lot. His pulse quickened as he scanned the rows of cars, and then he saw it, a small puppy slumped on the back seat of a locked sedan, its tiny chest rising and falling with shallow, labored breaths. Jason didn't think twice, he knew he had seconds to act, and what he was about to do would change everything. It was a scorching summer day in Texas, the kind of heat that seemed to press down on everything, turning the air into a suffocating blanket. Officer Jason Miller drove slowly through the city streets, his patrol car's air conditioning working overtime to provide relief from the blazing sun. The asphalt shimmered in the distance, and the sound of cicadas buzzed faintly through his partially rolled-down window. Jason's shift had been uneventful so far, routine patrols, a few minor traffic stops, nothing out of the ordinary. As he turned into the parking lot of a busy supermarket, something caught his attention. A car, an old beige sedan, was parked at an odd angle near the back of the lot. Jason wouldn't have thought much of it, but as he drove closer, he noticed the windows were completely rolled up. Even from a distance, he could feel the heat radiating off the asphalt, and the sight of a sealed car in such extreme conditions sent a flicker of unease through him. Pulling up next to the sedan, Jason turned off his engine and stepped out into the oppressive heat. The air outside was stifling, the kind that made it hard to breathe, and the smell of hot rubber and gasoline lingered in the lot. As he approached the car, he heard it, a faint, high-pitched whimper. His heart sank. He leaned down and peered through the tinted window. There, on the back seat, was a tiny German Shepherd puppy. The little dog lay sprawled on the seat, its small chest rising and falling rapidly. Its tongue lolled out of its mouth, and its fur was damp, matted against its small body. The puppy barely moved, its eyes half-closed, and Jason knew immediately that the animal was in serious trouble. The heat inside the car must have been unbearable, far worse than the temperature outside. Jason's stomach tightened. Who would leave a puppy in this heat, he muttered under his breath. He tried the car door, but as expected, it was locked. He knocked on the window, calling out to see if the owner might be nearby, but the parking lot was busy, and no one came forward. The puppy let out another weak whimper, and Jason felt a surge of urgency. There was no time to wait. Reaching for his radio, he called in to dispatch. "This is Officer Miller. I've got a locked vehicle with a distressed animal inside. I'm at the grocery store parking lot on 5th and Main. Requesting immediate backup and assistance." Even as he spoke, Jason knew backup might not arrive in time. The puppy's breathing was shallow, and its little body trembled. Jason could feel the seconds ticking by like a countdown. Looking around, he grabbed a flashlight with a heavy metal casing from his utility belt. He hesitated for a brief moment, then struck the rear passenger window with all his strength. The glass cracked on the first hit, and on the second, it shattered completely. Jason reached through the broken window, careful to avoid the shards, and unlocked the door. The wave of heat that rushed out was stifling, like opening an oven door. He quickly scooped up the puppy, cradling its limp body in his arms. It was burning hot to the touch, its fur slick with sweat, and its tiny head lolled against his chest. "Hang on, little one," Jason murmured, his voice tight with emotion. He rushed back to his patrol car, gently laying the puppy on a towel on the passenger seat. Turning the air conditioning to full blast, he grabbed a bottle of water from his pack and began pouring it over the puppy's paws and head, trying to cool it down. The little dog let out a faint whimper but didn't move. Jason clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He knew the puppy was in critical condition. As he reached for his radio again to request urgent clearance to head to the nearest vet, he glanced at the small, helpless creature beside him. "You're not alone," he said softly. "I'm going to get you through this." Jason's heart raced as he pulled out of the supermarket parking lot, his patrol car's sirens wailing. The puppy lay on the passenger seat, still motionless, its tiny chest rising and falling unevenly. Jason kept glancing over, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The air conditioning was on full blast, and he'd draped a damp towel over the puppy's small body, but he knew that wasn't enough. He needed to get to the vet, and fast. "Hang in there, little guy," he muttered, his voice filled with urgency. We're almost there. He called into dispatch, requesting priority clearance to the nearest veterinary clinic. They assured him that a team would be ready for him upon arrival. Jason pressed his foot harder on the gas, weaving through traffic with practiced precision. Every red light felt like a lifetime, and every glance at the puppy made his chest tighten. The small creature had gone so still that Jason feared the worst. Finally, the clinic came into view, its bright sign glowing against the late afternoon sun. Jason pulled into the parking lot, barely throwing the car into park before jumping out and gently scooping the puppy into his arms. The clinic staff rushed out to meet him, their faces a mix of concern and focus. "What happened?" one of the vets, a young woman named Dr. Ellie Carter, asked as she led Jason inside. "I found him locked in a car," Jason explained quickly, his voice edged with anger and worry. "The heat was unbearable, he was barely breathing when I got him out." Dr. Carter nodded, her expression serious as she motioned for Jason to place the puppy on an examination table. The staff immediately sprang into action, checking the puppy's vitals, placing cooling packs on its body, and starting in 4 to administer fluids. Jason stepped back, his hands clenched into fists as he watched them work. The minutes stretched on like hours. Jason paced the small waiting area, his mind racing. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment he'd found the puppy, lying helpless in the back seat of that stifling car. Who could be so negligent? Who could abandon such a fragile, innocent life? Finally, Dr. Carter emerged from the treatment room, pulling off her gloves. Jason turned to her, his expression a mix of hope and fear. "He's stable for now," she said, offering a small but reassuring smile. "It was close, but you got him here in time. He's responding to the fluids, and his temperature is coming down. He's not out of the woods yet, but he has a good chance." Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for saving him." Dr. Carter shook her head. "You saved him. If you hadn't acted so quickly, he wouldn't have made it. He's lucky you found him." Jason nodded, but a flicker of anger remained in his eyes. "I need to know who left him in that car. This shouldn't have happened." "We'll take care of him here," Dr. Carter assured him. "But I agree, whoever did this needs to be held accountable." Jason lingered at the clinic for a while, checking on the puppy and making sure it was comfortable. The little dog was resting now, its breathing steadier, and for the first time, Jason allowed himself to hope. As he left the clinic to follow up on the investigation, he glanced back at the tiny creature on the table. "You're a fighter," he whispered. "And I promise, I'll make sure you're safe from now on." Jason spent the next few hours following up on the case. Back at the station, he reviewed surveillance footage from the supermarket parking lot, determined to track down the person responsible for leaving the puppy in such dangerous conditions. The images on the screen showed the old beige sedan pulling into the lot earlier that afternoon. A man stepped out of the driver's side, glanced around, and locked the car before walking toward the store. Jason's jaw tightened as he watched the man disappear inside, leaving the helpless puppy behind. He fast-forwarded through the footage, noting the timestamp. The man didn't return to the car for nearly 2 hours. Jason clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. How could someone be so careless? The heat inside that car could have killed the puppy in minutes, let alone hours. He printed a still image of the man's face and the license plate of the car. There was no doubt in his mind this person needed to answer for their actions. After running the license plate through the system, Jason identified the owner, a local resident named Mark Collins. He lived a few miles away from the supermarket, in a modest suburban neighborhood. Jason grabbed the address and headed out, his determination growing with each passing moment. When he arrived at the address, the house appeared quiet. Jason knocked firmly on the door and waited. After a few moments, a man in his late 30s opened the door, looking surprised to see a police officer standing on his porch. "Mark Collins?" Jason asked, his voice steady but firm. Yeah," the man replied, frowning. "What's this about?" Jason held up the printed still image from the surveillance footage. "You were seen leaving your car in the supermarket parking lot earlier today. Inside that car, we found a puppy, a German Shepherd. The dog was in critical condition from the heat. The man's face went pale. I didn't mean to. I just ran into the store for a few things, he stammered. I didn't think it would take that long. Jason's expression hardened. Do you have any idea how hot it gets inside a locked car on a day like this? That puppy could have died. Mark opened his mouth to respond but quickly shut it, realizing there was nothing he could say to excuse his negligence. Jason continued, his voice calm but filled with authority. The puppy is safe now, thanks to the fast response of the veterinary team. But leaving an animal in a locked car like that is a criminal offense. I'll be filing charges for animal cruelty. The man hung his head, muttering an apology, but Jason wasn't interested in empty words. He issued a citation and explained the legal process, making it clear that this was more than just a warning. As he turned to leave, Mark called out, "What's going to happen to the dog?" Jason paused, glancing back. He's in good hands now. And trust me, he won't be coming back here. As Jason walked back to his car, he felt a flicker of satisfaction. Justice would be served, but more importantly, the puppy would never have to endure such cruelty again. As he drove back to the clinic, he couldn't help but think about the little dog, resting in safety after such a close call. When he arrived at the clinic, Dr. Carter greeted him with an update. The puppy's doing much better, she said with a smile. He's eating, his vitals are stable, and he's even wagging his tail a little. Jason's shoulders relaxed, and a small smile broke through his otherwise stern demeanor. That's the best news I've heard all day, he said. As he stepped into the room where the puppy was resting, the little dog lifted its head and looked at him with wide, curious eyes. Jason crouched down beside the table, reaching out to gently stroke the puppy's head. Hey there, buddy, he said softly. You're safe now. I promise, no one's ever going to hurt you again. The puppy's tail wagged weakly, and for the first time, Jason felt the weight of the day begin to lift. Over the next few days, Jason visited the clinic regularly to check on the puppy, who was recovering faster than anyone had expected. Each time Jason walked into the room, the little dog's tail would wag furiously, his bright eyes lighting up with recognition. It was clear that the puppy already trusted Jason, and the bond between them grew stronger with every visit. Dr. Carter gave Jason updates during each visit. He's doing incredibly well, she said during one of his stops. He's eating regularly, gaining strength, and his energy is coming back. You saved him, Jason. Without you, he wouldn't have made it. Jason would always brush off the praise, replying, I just did what anyone would have done. But deep down, he felt a sense of pride and a growing sense of responsibility. The thought of the puppy going back to someone like Mark Collins made his stomach turn. Jason knew the little dog deserved better, and he was determined to make sure he got it. By the end of the week, the puppy was ready to leave the clinic. As Dr. Carter handed Jason the paperwork for his release, she smiled knowingly. I'm guessing you've already thought about what's next for him. Jason hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I have. I don't think I can let him go. Dr. Carter laughed softly. I figured as much. He's already decided you're his person, you know. Jason looked down at the puppy, who was sitting at his feet, wagging his tail and looking up at him with adoration. It was hard to argue with that. I'll take him, Jason said firmly. He deserves a good home. After signing the necessary documents, Jason scooped up the puppy and carried him out to the patrol car. The little dog settled into the passenger seat, resting his head on Jason's arm as they drove home. Jason glanced over at him and chuckled. Looks like you're already making yourself comfortable, huh? When they arrived at Jason's house, he set up a comfortable corner in the living room for the puppy, complete with a soft bed, toys, and food bowls. But the little dog didn't seem interested in the setup. Instead, he followed Jason around the house, his tiny paws clicking on the floor, never letting him out of his sight. You're a shadow, aren't you? Jason said with a grin as he knelt down to pet him. Maybe that's what I'll call you, Shadow. Shadow barked softly in response, his tail wagging furiously. Jason laughed. All right, Shadow it is. That evening, Jason sat on the couch, exhausted but content, as Shadow curled up beside him, resting his head on Jason's lap. For the first time in what felt like weeks, Jason allowed himself to relax. He stroked Shadow's fur, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. "You've been through a lot, little guy," Jason said quietly. "But you're safe now. You've got a home, and you'll never have to go through anything like that again." Shadow looked up at him, his eyes full of trust and gratitude. Jason smiled, knowing he'd made the right decision. This little dog, once abandoned and left to suffer, was now part of his life. And in that moment, Jason realized that Shadow had already given him something just as valuable, a renewed sense of purpose and the kind of bond that only a loyal companion could provide. Over the following weeks, Shadow adjusted quickly to life with Jason. The once fragile puppy, who had barely clung to life in the sweltering car, blossomed into an energetic and curious little dog. His strength returned, his appetite grew, and his playful personality began to shine. Shadow followed Jason everywhere, whether it was around the house, out on errands, or even to the police station. Jason's colleagues, many of whom had heard the story of Shadow's rescue, quickly fell in love with him. "He's got the makings of a station mascot," one officer joked as Shadow wagged his tail enthusiastically at everyone who crossed his path. "I mean, look at that face. Who could resist?" Jason couldn't help but smile. Shadow had become a bright spot not just for him but for everyone at the station. The puppy brought joy and energy wherever he went, reminding them all that even on the hardest days, there was something worth smiling about. At home, Shadow's attachment to Jason only grew stronger. Every evening after Jason's shift, Shadow would greet him at the door with a flurry of excited barks and tail wags, as if they'd been apart for days instead of hours. They developed a routine. Jason would take Shadow for a long walk around the neighborhood, letting him explore and burn off his boundless energy. Afterward, they'd settle on the couch, where Shadow would curl up beside him, his head resting on Jason's leg. One evening, while sitting on the porch with Shadow at his feet, Jason thought back to the day he had found him. The memory of the puppy lying helpless in that car still haunted him, but now it felt like a distant nightmare. Shadow was happy, healthy, and thriving. He had gone from a victim of neglect to a beloved companion, and Jason couldn't imagine his life without him. But even as Shadow flourished, Jason couldn't shake his anger toward the man who had left him in the car. He made it a point to follow up on the case, ensuring that Mark Collins faced consequences for his actions. The charges of animal cruelty went to court, and Jason testified about the condition in which he had found Shadow. His testimony was compelling, and the judge ruled in favor of harsh penalties, including a fine and mandatory community service. While it didn't erase what had happened, it was a small measure of justice for Shadow. After the hearing, Jason returned home feeling a sense of closure. Shadow greeted him at the door as usual, his tail wagging furiously. Jason knelt down to pet him, smiling. "It's over now, buddy," he said softly. "No one's ever going to hurt you again." Shadow licked his face in response, as if to say he understood. Jason laughed and stood up, leading him outside for their evening walk. As they walked through the quiet streets, Jason felt a sense of peace. Shadow had come into his life in the most unexpected way, but he had brought so much light with him. Saving him hadn't just changed Shadow's life, it had changed Jason's, too. "You're more than just a dog, Shadow," Jason said, looking down at him with a smile. "You're family now." Shadow barked happily, trotting beside him as if he understood every word. As time passed, Shadow became an inseparable part of Jason's life. The little puppy, once barely clinging to survival, grew into a strong, loyal, and vibrant companion. His days were filled with joy and routine, long walks, visits to the station, and quiet evenings at home with Jason. Shadow's presence had turned Jason's house into a home, filling it with energy and warmth. One morning, as Jason was getting ready for work, Shadow stood by the door, wagging his tail excitedly. "You're ready to go, aren't you?" Jason chuckled, grabbing his keys. "All right, come on. Let's see what the guys at the station are up to." At the precinct, Shadow had become somewhat of a celebrity. Officers would greet him with pats and treats, and he loved every second of the attention. It wasn't unusual to see him lying under someone's desk or wandering around the office, bringing smiles to everyone he encountered. Shadow had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder of why their work mattered. One day, the captain pulled Jason aside. "You know, that dog's got something special about him," he said, nodding toward Shadow, who was happily chasing a ball one of the officers had thrown. "Have you thought about training him for K9 work? He's smart, he's got the energy, and he clearly trusts you more than anyone." Jason looked at Shadow, who had just proudly retrieved the ball and was trotting back with his tail wagging. The thought of training Shadow for K9 work hadn't crossed his mind, but the idea made sense. Shadow had already shown incredible intelligence and loyalty, and Jason knew that giving him a purpose could be just as rewarding for the dog as it would be for the department. "I'll think about it," Jason replied, watching Shadow with a smile. In the weeks that followed, Jason began introducing Shadow to basic training exercises. The puppy, now stronger and more confident than ever, picked up commands quickly. Shadow seemed to love the challenge, and the bond between him and Jason grew even deeper. They worked together every day, building trust and communication, and Shadow flourished under Jason's guidance. But beyond the training and the daily routines, Shadow's greatest gift was the way he had changed Jason's perspective. Before Shadow, Jason had approached his work with a sense of duty, often weighed down by the harsh realities of his job. But now, with Shadow by his side, he found himself looking for moments of hope and connection. Shadow reminded him that even in the darkest circumstances, there was always a chance for redemption and healing. One evening, after a particularly long day, Jason sat on the porch with Shadow at his feet, the stars twinkling above them. He reached down to scratch behind Shadow's ears, his voice soft. "You know, buddy, I thought I was saving you that day in the parking lot. But the truth is, you saved me just as much." Shadow looked up at him, his eyes full of trust and devotion. His tail wagged slowly, as if he understood every word. In that quiet moment, Jason felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Shadow had come into his life when he least expected it, and together, they had found something neither of them realized they were missing: a family. As they sat there in the stillness of the night, Jason knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Shadow wasn't just his dog, he was his partner, his companion, and his greatest reminder of the power of second chances. The ending of this story beautifully demonstrates the profound impact that one act of kindness can have, not only on the life of a vulnerable animal but on the person who chooses to help. Jason's journey with Shadow wasn't just about rescuing a puppy from danger, it was about discovering the depth of their bond and the way love and trust can heal even the deepest wounds. Shadow's transformation from a helpless, abandoned dog to a loyal companion and station favorite shows that with care, attention, and determination, even the most fragile lives can thrive. For Jason, Shadow became more than just a pet, he became a symbol of hope, resilience, and a reminder of why his work mattered. The decision to keep Shadow and train him for a purpose gave both of them a renewed sense of direction, proving that redemption isn't limited to those we save, it's something we often find within ourselves in the process. This story resonates because it highlights a universal truth: small moments of compassion can lead to life-changing outcomes. Jason's refusal to walk away from that locked car not only saved Shadow's life but brought immeasurable joy and meaning to his own. It's a testament to the power of second chances and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, leaving us with a sense of hope and the belief that even in the hardest moments, love and kindness can prevail.